Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
We can dance, everybody look at your hands. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safe to dance, oh it's safe to dance. Yes, it's safe to dance.
Hello and welcome to episode 254 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I am your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota. Over the past 4 days, I delivered what my friend Steve Flaherty has coined the Iditarod Tour, after the famous dog sled race in Alaska. This was a series of programs I did for various towns along the northern part of Minnesota, and I do it every February. For those who may not know, Minnesota is pretty darn cold and snowy in February. And there are a few places in Minnesota, few places in America that are any colder or any snowier than northern Minnesota. So each year I do this tour, and it's always an adventure in travels. This year our tour stops included International Falls, Grand Rapids, Eveleth, in Lutzen. You may have heard me mention last week that I was at the West Virginia Emergency Services Conference at Pipestem State Park Resort. What I did there was worth another mention. This was a special visit because we got to deliver a 4-part program that I developed called the Behavior Series. Listen up, this is good. This series has 4 instructors that present 4 topics of behavior. Chris Naum presents building behavior. Doug Klein presents fire behavior. Dave Dotson presents smoke behavior. And I present human behavior. And more specifically, the behavior of high-risk decision-making. This is a very powerful 4-part program that dials firefighters in on important components and critical information that you need for any structural firefight. All right, today's feature segment is part 2 of my 2-part interview with Elyria Fire Department Assistant Chief Joe Pronesti, talking about the challenges of fighting fires in buildings on Main Street, USA. Stick around after the feature segment is done, and I will tell you where the SAMatters tour stop is headed next. We have a busy couple of months coming up. Maybe I'll be somewhere near you. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, part 2 of my discussion with Elyria Fire Department Assistant Chief Joe Pronesti.
Also, 2 other things. Every fire department, and I stress this towards part-time volunteer departments, every fire department has some sort of drill night or some sort of drill day. And when the summer the weather gets better in your community, on a weekend or whatever, take your aerial out or get on the roofs of these buildings. It is paramount that you get on the roofs of these buildings. Twofold. Number one, you get some practice putting your aerial up on these buildings or around these buildings rather than the front ramp every single day or every single drill night. And 2, you get a good view of all sides of the building being on these roofs where you can see, where there might be some light shafts to take or, whatever, those kind of things. And then finally, there's one item on these streets that must stop you in your tracks, and that's a yard dumpster. When you are driving up and down and you see a yard dumpster, big dumpster, construction dumpster, we call them yard dumpsters where I'm at, that means there's renovations. And since you've given me this platform, I'm going to give some homework to all our readers. October 17th, 1966, 23rd Street collapse, New York City. If you just Google that, one of the biggest issues with that event was renovations. It was a renovated building. And to this day, I always make sure that I talk about that event and that that our members of the fire service, no matter where they're from, know and understand that even today, 50 some years later, that renovations can play a part in these buildings to where, they can cause a catastrophic event or I got you. There's lots of them, but the 23rd Street, the Von Dome Hotel in 72 in Boston, all kinds, but you have to study the past to understand. And there's lots of, this was our father's fire. This was our grandfather's fire. These fires were this is what the textbooks were written on, that we grew up on, that those types of fires. And we lost them all.
We've been at it like almost 40 minutes now. So I want to give you a chance to share anything that you might want to share on the topic of the Main Street fire that maybe hasn't come out in any of the forms of the questions that I've asked you. So like, oh yeah, I want to make sure that I get this in or get this in, give you a chance to cover any of that I might have missed in my questioning. And then I'm going to shift gears and ask you about a couple of different things.
Sure. Well, I think if anything, I just wanted to utilize this again. Thanks for having me utilize this platform, is to get members out and about and look at their buildings and their Main Street ordinary constructed buildings. You will go in these buildings to fight fire. They are, and if you may not be going directly into the building that is well involved, but you're going to go into the exposures that are connected. So you have to have you are going to be offensive. And with that, you have to know the hazards. So, again, these are different buildings. These are buildings that you're going to be masking up and going in and fighting fire. There's so much, but I would say that besides what we touched on, apparatus placement is a huge concern. That when you mentioned, I call it forecasting, but another thing that we do that we sometimes get lost in that fog is that when you go to residential building fires or residential dwelling fires, we put our apparatus in spots that, okay, here it is. It's every day. We put the truck in front and the engine right here, pull past 3 sides, all this and this. You get a fire in these kind of buildings where you put your pumper, your aerial, you're not moving it. And we have collapse concerns. We have, forecasting. You have one truck company in your town, let's say, and the next one is 20 minutes away. You may not want that truck right in front of the florist shop at 3 a.m. that has heavy fire conditions. You may want to think about putting that farther down or in the alley, or, that's another thing. Most of these buildings all have some sort of alley way in the rear because that's how they got their stock. Well, can your apparatus negotiate down these alleys? Another thing in these towns, these are the main hubs. You look up, besides apparatus restrictions, you got high power lines. All these things that don't come into play in a residential dwelling come into play with these buildings. And RIT, if you think 3 guys and a RIT bag is going to be fine on your Main Street, you're crazy. You need to have multiple RIT companies, an A side, a C side, more than 3 people. You're going to probably need if you're operating in buildings, again, another position where I think a command officer should be in charge of that RIT group or group. So those are the big things. And again, we have an hour, and again, in my class, which can be anywhere from 8 hours to 2 or 3 days, we really go into this, and I send the attendee away with hopefully a better understanding. But everything I teach is available to the student. They get, if they want it, they get it in a cloud-based app, and they can take it back to their departments and share. And that's what I'm all about. So we try to cover it as much as we can here in a short time, but it really is. These are complex buildings that have complex strategy and tactics that need start off with good command presence and knowledge.
Excellent summary. So I am now going to shift gears, but before I shift gears, what I'd like for you to do you have your do you have your Facebook up there as well, Joe?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and type in, if you wouldn't mind, an email address where if somebody wanted to follow up with you with a question or an interest in a class,
Okay.
how they might be able to find you. So just drop that into the comment section there, and then they'll have that, because this video will stay on Facebook for a while, and
Sure.
they'll be able to get that. So the new pathway I want to go down here is before we started the video, you were talking to me about your passion about learning from departments who've had line of duty death events and talking with them after the fact to see what has changed. Is it better? Is it worse? What did they learn? What changes have they made? And I'm intrigued by this because the platform for my show initially was to give voice to those who've had near misses, and some of those near miss events, it did involve fatalities, and we have talked a little bit on some of those episodes about the after event changes and things like that. But I am now intrigued by first I want you to talk about what is the passion that drove you to have this interest, and then maybe some examples, if you're comfortable sharing them, of who you've talked to and what are some of the things that are coming out of those conversations.
Well, yeah, I've been fortunate enough to Fire Engineering has allowed me to be part of their Blog Talk podcast series that's on nightly, and every 6 or 7 weeks is my podcast. And while it's titled Main Street Firefighting, I decided that in 2019 I was going to focus on line of duty deaths and hear from members who were either part of the event or their department experienced it. And what I wanted to do was put some sort of audible lesson or program along with the reports or the internal reports or the NIOSH reports. So I wanted people to have listen, an audible, someone talking to them about the event. So I'm a big reader in learning from the past. Plus, I have a very good friend. I would say he's my best friend. That is a police officer, and my city suffered a line of duty death in 2010 in the police department, and my friend was directly affected. And not to get too personal, I saw what it did to the department. I saw what a line of duty death, what all kinds of things. And I wanted to make sure that I put out an all-out effort, that try everything I can so it doesn't happen in my department. And the only way that's going to happen, in my opinion, and for anybody or any command officer or company officer worth their salt, is to read and understand what took place in these other events. And so these particular individuals who I've contacted for my podcast, who I've interviewed, they've I'll give a little plug. The first one coming up in March will be Toledo, Ohio, for the double line of duty death, Chief Mike Benedum. But future ones will be, I've interviewed members from Hamilton, Ohio, Homewood, Illinois, Bryan, Texas. I will be doing one on Cincinnati, where they lost, actually we'll be doing two, talking about 2 line of duty deaths there, Oscar Armstrong and Daryl Gordon. I interviewed Pete Van Dorp, talk about Chicago, has lost we talked two separate line of duty deaths there with him. And it's all about trying to put a little bit more personal, I don't want to say spin, but a personal feel for someone to get as much information as possible. And that's what drives me. And you're just not going to learn unless you study the past. It just is that simple. You have to. And I found that in doing these, some are more apt to discuss and be open than others. Some are very self-critical. Others, you're not going to change everybody, I guess. And that's unfortunate, but you and I think we share the passion of, if we can just change one, whatever, we got 100 people. If one person gets it, fine. I mean, that's how I am. You talk to a hell of a lot more people than I do, but I mean that if you can just touch one person, great. That's how I look at it.
Have they shared anything about how those events impacted the morale or culture or mindset within their department? Do you go down that path of that conversation? Or no?
Yeah, I do. For the most part, for instance, I'll give you a good one, is Homewood, Illinois. I spoke to a deputy chief, second in command there, who on the night that they lost, they had a fire in March 2010 that killed a young firefighter, Brian Carey, in a 975-foot square home ranch. There's a lot of mistakes made that night. And the deputy that I spoke to was driving the pumper that night. And they arrived with a crew of 5. They had mutual aid coming. But anyway, they have since now, I asked him, so what's it like now in Homewood? He says it's like night and day. He says, they have officer development. He said before the line of duty death, they were just getting by, getting through the day and going home in the morning. They stress more command and control. And I guess that is Bryan, Texas is another one. Bryan, Texas has increased their staffing. Then they had lost 2 firefighters coming up on the anniversary now in February. I believe it's been about 6 or 7 years now, maybe a little longer, but they lost 2 firefighters in a VFW hall. And since then, they've added more people. They looked at their procedures, but a lot of these fires, Chief, weren't a lot, some mistakes were made and others, things just happened, And I also want to stress that command officers have to be able to handle when things happen. And that has a lot to do with whether or not things go right or wrong, is that when these events occur, that as a command officer, you can adjust or throw the red flag out there and challenge things and keep your people safe.
The one thing that I have noticed, Joe, and some of those folks that I have talked to who've had these line of duty death events, is soon after there is often a level of blame or looking for culpability, or who's responsible for this, whose fault is it. Have you noticed, and maybe you don't go down that path in your discussions with them, but early on afterwards, my observation has been in these discussions is they kind of go through a period of ugly blame, either self-blame or blaming someone else. Have you noticed any of this?
Yes, and in fact, in one particular line of duty death that in one of these, and I don't want to say where, but the report was not was in error compared to what the interviews and the actual what took place. And so that in itself may lend someone to say, well, are we doing a good enough job critiquing these events and interviewing and doing these? Yeah, there's that gamut of emotion, and in all these there was, but I think as time goes by with these events and these particular interviews that I've done, as time goes by, you'll see that they needed to change, and they needed to get their story out. And there's lots that don't. There's lots of departments that just don't, and that's okay. I don't want to say it's okay. It's not okay. But there's other, if you truly want to give to the service, you have to share. You have to share your experiences.
I don't want you to identify where, but have you tried to contact anybody and they've said, yeah, I'm not interested in having a conversation about that?
What they have done is they just don't answer you. And you get a good sense of that they just don't want, they either don't trust you, they don't know who you are. Hell, nobody knows who I am. But I mean, so they're guarded. So I do the best I can and try to get the stories out there of these events. But yeah, there's several that never got back. And this was after repeated attempts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have tried to engage a few people who've had similar experiences, and my efforts have gone unsuccessful. And like you, I think for the most part, for most fire departments, I'm an unknown. They don't know me. They don't know my motive. They might think I'm going to try to bring them on and criticize them, which is
Right.
not the case. But there's still some defensiveness and guarding that goes on. So from those you've done interviews with, is there any central themes or central lessons that you could kind of package together and say, here are some things that are coming out of these interviews that you have found interesting?
First and foremost, to a person, they all said they just didn't think it would happen. That they just didn't see the event unfolding in their community. That it just wasn't going to happen. The other one was, once things went south on the fire ground, they went south. And they went south in a hurry. The domino, I guess, if you will, the domino falling, they couldn't stop it. Communications breaking down, just things that kind of led me to believe that as a fire service, we need to do a better job of teaching our command officers how to handle an emergency. Look at Sully landing that plane in the Hudson. He was trained and prepared to handle that emergency. What I find is that we have a lot of command level officers across the country that, okay, here's the RIP bag, and it's this magical thing that's going to save everybody, but yet they don't participate in how to handle radio communications or how they're going to talk, or using simulation exercises to handle a mayday, and having the courage to tell everybody to shut up and stay off the air, and really that military type of leadership. You want to try to prevent a mayday? A good friend of mine who passed away is a big leader in the fire service, said, you want to try to prevent the mayday? Of course you do. But I also want firefighters to feel that if they do get into trouble, they want you to be the person on the other end. That's what I try to strive for. That's what I want all company and command level bosses to try to work themselves to be, that they're the ones that the firefighters secretly say, I don't want to get in trouble, but if I do, I want that guy on the other end.
Okay. I think one of the things you said there that really screamed out to me was that up till when it happened, they never thought they would be the department that would happen to. That's
Yes.
a theme that I heard from those I've talked to as well, that they were, I don't know if it was in denial or just believed that they were better prepared than those organizations who have line of duty deaths. Like they would look at it and say,
That might happen to somebody else, but not to us. We're well equipped, we're well trained, we're well staffed. Those things happen there, but they don't happen here. Kind of humbling, I would assume, in your conversations with them.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing that I found, and we're running short, but I will tell you this: we also in my department, a couple of summers ago, we had a church fire. And we had a close call at this church fire. And we, 2 days later, and I'm kind of speeding it up, but 2 days later, an officer throws a NIOSH report down on the desk of a church fire in Indiana that killed a firefighter. And he goes, "This was just like ours." And I'm saying to myself, doggone it. If we did a better job of educating and training our members utilizing these reports prior, maybe we didn't have a close call, or that was all we had. And so we came close, and it's like, yeah, now let's do something about it. Let's train. Let's utilize these reports. I don't know. I wish I had the answer in my remaining years before I retire and worry about shooting par. I'm going to make it my passion.
Let me ask you one question about that church fire, the NIOSH report. You had that close call, and you read the NIOSH report. In reflective hindsight, having read that NIOSH report after you had your close call, were you able to say to yourself, had I read this report before we had our church fire, we might not have done some things that we did, because I would have preloaded and learned those lessons in advance and would have been smarter for our church fire?
Yes, I do believe that. I think it at least puts some knowledge in the front lobe of your brain on arrival that you have a large open. The big thing with this was what I like to say, era and area, that in your district that most of the buildings are from a certain era, and this church was in an area where the era was more modern materials. And I think had we had a program set up in my department, and we still really don't yet, it's partly my fault and part of leadership, but there's maybe we don't have the close call. Without a doubt.
All right, Joe, we've exhausted the time that we have scheduled to be together. Is there anything that you would want to share in closing for the audience on this show?
No, I mean, two things, I guess. Take a look at your downtown, your main street, your type 3 ordinary constructed buildings. Maybe dust off those building construction books that are sitting on the shelf, or buy books. Google the name Vincent Dunn. And if anybody wants a class, they can feel free to reach out to me, and we can try to put something together. I utilize, when I do a class, your buildings. I put them into simulators, simulation type of exercises, so the members get they look at their buildings. It seems to have a better reaction and a better buy-in when you utilize them. So they can certainly reach out to me at my email, efdchief3@outlook.com. They can also call my cell. I'll provide it. It's no big deal. 440-669-4247.
Thank you, Chief Pronesti, for being my guest today and sharing your knowledge with our audience. Well, I never thought we'd make it this far, but we did. Our show is fast approaching its 5th anniversary. I'm very proud that we are the longest running, consistently broadcasted, independently operated show focused on a singular mission to improve the safety and survival of individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. Let me pause for a moment and elaborate on one component of that last statement, the consistently broadcasted part. A new episode of this show has been released every Tuesday for the past 5 years. I've not missed putting out a new episode on a Tuesday, ever. Never, ever. Nope, never happened. No other podcaster in this space can make that claim. In fact, most podcasters fade out after a dozen or so episodes, or they become very inconsistent with airing new episodes. Not me. You can set your clock by the fact that I'm going to release a new episode every Tuesday morning. You can wake up and you know you're going to have fresh content from me for you to watch and listen to. It's my promise to you. Now, I have to admit that it's not always an easy promise to keep sometimes. My travel schedule means that there are many times that I'm recording and or editing this show well after midnight on Monday night because I know I have to keep my promise and have that new episode ready for you by 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. And I really understand why other podcasters fade or they're inconsistent. It can get pretty lonely here behind the microphone and behind the camera. And by lonely, I mean we podcasters, videocasters, rarely get any feedback from you, the viewers and listeners. Sure, we see the stats that tell us our episodes are getting thousands of downloads and views, but rarely does anyone ever write a review or send me an email giving some feedback on the show. So I rarely know if the show is inspiring anybody or not. But I keep on keeping on, putting out content that is safety focused that I think can be helpful to you. Now, in honor of those who watch and listen to this show and have been with us for a while, we're going to do a giveaway of products from our sponsors and supporters in celebration of our 5th anniversary. Listen to upcoming episodes and watch the SAMatters.com website for more on that.
Real expectations, because SA matters.
Know your limit. Know your partner's limit, because SA matters. Assumptions are bad. SA matters.
Proper PPE is important because SA matters.
Flawed situational awareness is a really big deal. SA matters. Know your water supply, because SA matters.
Bears and Cougars, SA matters.
Go versus no go, because SA matters.
Confidence is good. Overconfidence is bad. SA matters.
Buddies matter, because SA matters.
SA matters, so don't get angry.
When the pigs are eating lemons, SA matters.
Our academy class is going home today because we know that SA matters.
SA matters!
The Situational Awareness Matters show was launched in 2014 with a purpose: to give a platform to those who have had near-miss events to share their stories, just like the ones you've listened to here. When I'm on the road delivering classes on situational awareness, I often ask the attendees if they've ever had a near-miss event, and they have shared with me some amazing, amazing stories. It's stories like episodes 249, 250, and 251 with Devon Farmer and John Buckman from German Township. Stories just like theirs that motivated me to launch this podcast in the first place. So those lessons can be shared with a bigger audience. You. The Situational Awareness Matters show podcasted as SA Matters Radio, and our companion video program, SA Matters TV channel on YouTube, along with other videos we've posted there, have enjoyed over more than 800,000 downloads. That number just blows my mind and far exceeds all my expectations. I am so thankful for your support. I feel so honored to be able to provide this platform for these amazing stories to be shared. If you like the show, please do me a solid favor. Subscribe. It's easy. For the audio version, go to SA Matters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version, it's SA Matters TV on YouTube. And if you find any value in the show, I'd really appreciate it if you would consider giving it a rating and a review. Your ratings and reviews help others to find the show, and most importantly, your feedback inspires me to work harder for you. It really does. Since 2007, Situational Awareness Matters instructors have helped more than 1,300 organizations and have trained over 75,000 individuals to improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, public transportation operators, aviation workers, oil refinery, process operators, and so many more. If you work in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, or if you know anybody that does, we're here to help improve yours or their safety and survival, and to help you accomplish the most important goal of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love you.
I think Rich's ability to connect with any crowd, that's a gift that he has, and it's easily transferable.
This is the second or third time that I've heard him speak. There's some teeth to the information that he brings.
It's been really good. Good mixes. He knows when to throw in a joke here and there to get you back involved.
Some tools. I'm a new lieutenant, so very, very interesting. And some of these things I can take back to the station and use with some of the new firefighters I have on my crew.
Something to get you thinking about your job more, big picture type stuff. I've seen him before. A good review for sure.
I have heard him before, yes. After he speaks, there's usually an enlightenment because now they're more aware of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing as they respond to calls.
He's very, very knowledgeable. I'm enjoying it so far.
And that intuition, that's a big one. The video that you just showed up here, we're getting a lot out of this. I think this is a really good seminar, especially for new people and old. Well, I think it's very informative. This talk gives us more ammunition to do all three.
They're relatable to what we have experienced or very well could experience, so he makes it easy to let the knowledge sink in.
I mean, it's awesome. A lot of stories you can usually relate to yourself and calls you have been on, aha moment. Like, he just helps you focus on picking out the right things. It's awesome. It's a refresher and keeps my eyes open. It's good stuff.
If people listen to the message that he has, it's an incredible message delivered by a very compassionate person. Strategy and tactics are going to always change. Situational awareness it doesn't change. It's always there.
He's got some good stories to tell, and he's very thorough with his stories, and it's interesting listening to him.
Very clear speaker, and he talks on our level because he's been there, he's been in the trenches. I think he's doing well, and I'm looking forward to the second half.
I would like to take a moment to honor and thank the companies, organizations, agencies, and departments that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. The West Virginia Emergency Services Conference in Pipestem, West Virginia. The International Falls Fire Department in International Falls, Minnesota. The Grand Rapids Fire Department in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. The Eveleth Fire Department in Eveleth, Minnesota. And the Lutsen Fire Department in Lutsen, Minnesota. If you're interested in where we're going to be upcoming, here's the schedule. On March 5 through 7, we're going to be at the Baytown Fire Department in Baytown, Texas. March 8th, we're going to be at the Ponderosa Fire Department in Houston, Texas. March 9th, the Northwest Volunteer Fire Department, also in Houston, Texas. March 12th, we're going to travel to Maryland, to the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program in Towson, Maryland. This will be my 22nd consecutive year presenting for them. March 25 through April 3, I'll be traveling to the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Oahu, Hawaii. April 11th at the Fire Department Instructors Conference in Indianapolis, Indiana. March 14 to 16, the Washington Fire Training Officers Association Conference in Wenatchee, Washington. April 25 at the International Association of Fire Chiefs Company Officer Leadership Series in Atlanta, Georgia. April 27, the Cook County Emergency Management Agency Seminar in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. April 30 to May 1, at the New Hanover County Fire Department Officer Development Seminar in Wilmington, North Carolina. If you want to see all the locations of the upcoming events, just head over to the SAMatters.com website. They're all listed there. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the SAMatters.com homepage, and I'll give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there are several ways that you can do that. Check the show notes on this episode for how to get connected with us by signing up for our monthly newsletter, subscribing to the SA Matters radio podcast, subscribing to the SA Matters TV YouTube channel, and how to follow us on the social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 254 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Assistant Chief Joe Pronesti. Thank you to our awesome sponsor, Midwest Fire. And I'm serious, if you're in the market for a pumper tanker, or a brush truck, check them out, MidwestFire.com. Thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, organizations, and associations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted a live stream training program where I come to your organization live via the internet and train your members. Thank you to the more than 2,500 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The feedback I receive from Academy graduates is just amazing and humbling, and I thank you for that. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SAMatters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.